Welcome to Changing the Game, where bold leaders, rule breakers, and trailblazers drop the playbook and share how they lead, win, and shake things up. Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm joined by Nina Ligon. Nina is an equestrian Olympian who competed in the London Games representing Thailand, and she was the youngest equestrian Olympian there at the time. But her story doesn't stop at the Olympics. She studied engineering at Stanford, attended Yale School of Management, and found herself working in some pretty cool rooms at companies like Headspace and Cowboy Ventures. Along the way, she discovered that what she loved wasn't just being around ideas, it was building them. The realization led her to create Generation Sports, an athletic wear brand designed specifically for athletic bodies. And I'm so excited to have her here. Welcome, Nina.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Me too. I think you are probably the most unconventional athlete maybe I've had on the show, being first equestrian athlete, that's for sure. And you have a really cool background. I mean, I'm excited to continue to learn from you about your journey today because there's just you've done so much.
Yeah, definitely a nonlinear journey so far.
Yes, very nonlinear. So, as I kind of set up, very unique journey. When people ask you in this chapter or just in general, what do you do? What do you tell them?
Yeah, the answer evolves a lot depending on what I'm doing at the time. I would say right now, usually the pitch I give is that I'm a former professional athlete and the founder of Generation Sport, which is a women's activewear brand built around some of the challenges I suffered with as an athlete and things that I know that my friends, other women athletes, young girls still struggle with today. And so that's usually how I describe myself. But athlete actually never used to be part of how I would pitch myself to people when I was working at Headspace. I was like, I'm a product designer. I was a Stanford product design graduate, and it was all about being like this design persona. And then when I went to my MBA at Yale, I was kind of pitching myself more as an engineer because I think it always felt like I wanted to pitch myself in a way that felt like it would stand out a little bit and feel unique to the situation that I was in. And then I was kind of almost shifting identities everywhere I was going. But I think the most interesting part was that I used to really underplay the impact that sport and being an athlete had on my career. And now working in a career that is very sport oriented, it has become really the forefront, and it's something that I've really leaned into. And it's been really cool to see the impact that can have and the conversations that it can spark.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that your story is unique in itself from other guests I've talked to here because you actually said you downplayed the sport side a little bit, whereas
Yeah.
I think a lot of other guests have been like, all I knew was sport and that was my true identity, and I really had to shift outside that box, and it was really difficult. So, how were you able to shift identities like that so seamlessly between athlete to engineer to designer, so many different identities, honestly?
Yeah, I think some of it was a bit of luck with the timing of how my shift actually happened. And then part of it was just feeling kind of a big imposter syndrome, and that sometimes saying that you were an athlete wasn't always super well respected in the places where I was, it came with a certain connotation of, um, you know, what your level of intelligence or education might have looked like, which I think is completely false. Especially going to Stanford with a bunch of really smart athlete engineers and people who are multi hyphenate and can do both. But to the first point, I think the biggest thing for me was I kind of had a really cold hard stop to my athletic career. I competed in London 2012. It was the last competition I ever did. I've never been on a horse competitively since. I've only done it for fun. And 3 weeks later, I started at Stanford as a freshman. I was in orientation. I was in this entirely new environment that was completely unfamiliar with a whole group of people that were also embarking on a journey that was completely unfamiliar. So I think there was something very special about that time where everyone is trying to find themselves. They're reshaping their identity. They're either building off an identity that they've been building for years, or they're kind of starting from scratch. And I think that made for a really great playground or sandbox to be able to experiment and to be open-minded to trying something new and kind of being bad at something. So for me, I think I really needed that start from scratch, like tear down every part of my identity, everything I've been doing for the past few years, everything I've been working for, and start from zero. Which is not to say it was easy. I really struggled feeling like I couldn't call myself an athlete because I wasn't, and technically an athlete when I was at Stanford. I wasn't, at the Red Barn. I wasn't riding with the team. I wasn't playing a sport competitively at the time. And so this entire identity I'd had around being a athlete all through, my lower school, middle school, high school years, taking 2 years off before school to just be a focused athlete, all of a sudden went away. And I almost felt like I couldn't claim that title.
Yeah.
And that took a lot of time to work through for sure.
Yeah, that is super interesting. How did you, I mean, you said it took a lot of time to work through. What was
Yeah.
like one thing that helped you? Did you have to throw yourself really full-fledged into the engineering track, or what helped you kind of like make that shift?
Yeah. Part of it was trying to find a new sense of identity by not kind of trying to find a new sport, not trying to join a club team, not trying to make sport my identity anymore. It gave me a chance to realize, like, to be bored and to realize that, what is my
Yeah.
purpose? What do I do with my time? I have all of this free time that I've never had before. I have no structure. And that, I think, really opened up the doors to start testing things out. So, I mean, for me, the big thing was I'd always been interested in physical products, in industrial design, and how do people think about packaging? How do people design furniture? Everything from architecture and interior design through to electronics and hardware. And that was something I'd never really let myself explore because I didn't really think of myself as strong in STEM in kind of in my youth. And so I just went to the design professor at Stanford and was like, can I sit down in a class and see if I like it? And that was the real moment that clicked for me. And then I started really building my identity around being this like hands-on physical product designer, and making that kind of my 4 years at Stanford, which who knows if that's healthy to be so one note in your identity there. But I think it really helped me to find something that got me so excited that I could be in the machine shop getting a similar flow state experience to what I would do when I was training. And there were little bits and pieces that reminded me of what I loved about being an athlete and training full time, that I was able to find somewhere else. And I kept just pulling on those threads and seeing where they would take me.
Yeah, I actually do think it's pretty cool that you were able to throw yourself into it for like that chapter. Like you said, I don't know if it's like healthy for me to,
Yeah.
throw yourself into this full time like this, but it's like a season of life. Like you were full-time athlete and that was your focus. And then you were full-time design and you were full-time throwing yourself into this new experience.
Yeah.
And I think it's really powerful that you said you let yourself be bored because I think you and I think we're at the same age. So we had that opportunity to be bored back in college. And I think there's so many distractions now for us that it's sometimes hard to like let yourself be bored and see what naturally sparks your curiosity.
Mhm. No, completely. It's very hard. I find like it's so easy to fill every minute of the day with something that grabs attention and to lose that opportunity to just let your brain wander and kind of discover what you might not have known about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually have to like put my phone in timeout for that reason and let myself be bored or pick up a book or do something that like actually works my brain. It's so tough. And before we get too out, I want to dive into your career journey because it is so nonlinear, as you mentioned before.
Yeah.
But before we get too off topic on your athletic career, I'm just curious, like your experience in equestrian. How did you get into the sport, and what was your favorite experience? Because you don't hear too many athletes being like, "Yeah, I'm an equestrian athlete." So I just want to hear about that.
Yeah, it's a small world. There are not a ton of us, and especially not from Thailand. But my mom really got me into it. It was something that she enjoyed, not competitively, but just out of she loved horses and just the experience of riding. And so it was a pretty idyllic introduction to it. We used to go to this beach every summer in Thailand called Hua Hin, and we used to retire old racehorses to the beach, and you could rent,
Wow.
an hour of time on this old retired crazy racehorse. And my mom would just kind of like throw me up on these, usually the ponies, not the big like scary horses to begin with. And that's what I think really sparked my love of it. And it was something I continued with living in the US. I grew up on the East Coast, which is very horse country. And I think that that I got the bug from there, and was obsessed from a very young age, not just with the horses and being in the barn, but also the sport. And I discovered my sport of eventing very early on at around I think 9 or 10 years old. And for some reason, it really stuck with me. And I was just like, this looks cool. It's exciting. And it's the thing that I just knew I wanted to do. And I think that's been very rare for me to have that sort of gut feeling so strongly of something that I've wanted to do. Usually I've had to kind of coach myself into learning to love things. And so this was a really kind of unique experience to have that special moment of feeling like, oh, wow, this fits. And this is something that I can both love and be good at the same time.
Yeah. That's like a beautiful picture that you painted of like the racehorses retiring to the beach in Thailand. Like that's what a nice life, right?
Very nice. Yeah. Certainly they don't do it anymore. The horses or ponies have gotten smaller and much more controlled and well trained. I think it was definitely like a liability at the time, but there were fewer rules back then.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. You said you had a gut feeling that was the thing for you and it came really easy for you. Does that gut feeling show up in your current career journey, or has it shown up in the past for you where you've been like, this is the direction I should go?
It definitely has, but I think my ability to listen to it has decreased. I think the cool thing, having a gut feeling when you're like 5 or 6 or 7 is just, it's just your reality. It's like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do it. You're not constrained by, society or your own preconceived notions about yourself and what you're capable of. So I still have it. It's harder to find now, I would say. And the signals are very different, but there have been a couple times, I think joining Headspace was a big one. I had another offer for higher salary that was in San Francisco Bay Area where I was already living. It was more adjacent to the work I'd been doing before, which was more like hardware development. But Headspace was a bit more, it was an unproven, just raised a Series A startup. Nobody had heard of it. People were like, why would you go work for a meditation company? That's like, people were honestly like, meditation app, that sounds stupid. And I was like, well, you know what? There was something about the mix of the team, the product, the mission, that was really resonating with me. And I felt this draw of, I think this would be a really fun place to work. And I think I would really be able to go and make an impact here. So that was one example. And I think I've had other little examples along the way of, in the end, every decision I can overanalyze, build a decision matrix, do the pros and cons. And usually there's one that is kind of speaking louder to me than everything else. And for some reason, I can't get it out of my head. I can't stop thinking, what if I did this? And usually it's been correct to follow that. I'm sure there have been times where that's led me astray, where I have shiny object syndrome. I love to chase, the grass that's looking greener on the other side. So I have to kind of pay attention to that as well. But typically that unique sensation of, I think there's something really special here and I can't stop thinking about it is the thing that has pulled me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like an analytical approach to the gut feeling now that you've gotten older almost. Like it's still there, it still comes up, but you're like, I'm going to apply some logic to this and see if it still checks out. And if it keeps coming up, then it works. I love that approach. I would also argue that whoever told you that Headspace or meditation app sounded dumb lacks vision.
Yeah. I think that's been proven.
Yes, 100%. Like I remember this was years ago, probably 2018 for me was the first time I ever really dabbled in meditation, and it was through the Headspace app. That's what I downloaded and that's what I used because I was like, having a hard time in a job. I needed something to help with the management of stress, and it was really the thing that I was like, okay, I'll try this, and
Yeah.
it ended up being a really, really powerful tool for me. I went on to get my yoga instructor certification and teach
Mm,
meditation, but it's crazy that like your
amazing.
app that you were designing, your company helped pave the way for so many people and given so many people tools to manage things in their life. I just absolutely love it.
Yeah, that's a really special feeling to have. And thank you for sharing that too, of knowing that the work that you're putting out into the world is impacting people and is kind of in some ways shaping their lives in being a small part of the journey is really exciting and part of what I like about building products that actually get into people's hands and they can use.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've done so many cool things. So I want to talk about your career journey too, since we're on the topic of Headspace.
Yeah.
How did you land there? Obviously, it took some analytical gut feelings to get there, but how did you land there? Walk us through your career journey a little bit here.
Yeah, it was a lot of luck and timing. um, I had a friend who I had who's in Stanford Business School at the time. I'd taken a class with him, and he knew about my interest in design and that I was an athlete and that I'd actually used meditation quite a bit as part of my practice as an athlete. And I'd kind of grown up being taught to meditate, being in more of a Thai Buddhist culture. Um, and he had worked there for a summer. It's like, I think you should apply for an internship. At the time, I had no jobs lined up. It was like 3 weeks before graduation. It's like, great, I'm gonna I'm gonna apply for this internship, and I'm just gonna get this for the summer and hopefully figure out my life afterwards. And then that actually fortuitously turned into a full-time offer. And obviously, when I was there over the summer, I was like, this is the place that I want to be and I want to stay and continue working at. So cannot stress how much just timing can make a really big impact um, in that decision. And if that internship hadn't come up for Headspace, maybe I wouldn't have given it a try. I might have gone kind of more traditional recruiting routes, but I definitely gave it a try over the summer and then looked for other jobs and just found like, no, this is the place I want to be at. And I think there's something really special here. So that was kind of how I got my start. It certainly wasn't intentional or planned. Looking back, it seems like the perfect fit of Headspace was known really for being really designed forward for understanding how to take a practice that was traditionally very spiritual and kind of mystic and turn that into something that felt much more commercially accessible to people and kind of took a bit of the religion and spirituality away from it. And I think that was a really hard nuance to hit. So it was a great place to start my career as a designer, as well as so mission aligned with my experience as an athlete and feeling like I had this wonderful tool that I could use as an athlete that people really weren't utilizing at the time, and people were kind of embarrassed to say that they did. It all looks like it fits perfectly in hindsight. I think those were like, part of the things I brought up in my interview, but I certainly didn't go out searching for that. And I'm just very glad that, things aligned the way they did. And I give a lot of credit to creating your own luck and putting yourself in situations where this kind of stuff can happen.
Yeah, totally. I'm under the firm belief that everything happens for a reason, that you're put in places that are supposed to teach you
Yeah.
something. And it was like, yeah, I didn't go out seeking it, but the opportunity arrived and I decided to make the most of it. And you did incredible things there. And you were there for how many years?
I was there for just under 3 years.
Okay. Yeah. So a while. So then what happened from there? Remind me, you went to Yale School of Management too. So that seems
Yeah.
like, like design, engineering background. And then you're like, I'm going to go into business school.
Yeah.
So what, what caused that interest for you, or how does that fall into your career path here?
Yeah. I was definitely feeling kind of as I was hitting the 2-year mark at Headspace that I was realizing that while I followed my gut in terms of being a designer and loving to build things, it actually wasn't the career path that I wanted to be on. The biggest thing was I would see people in these incredible like design leadership positions, and I didn't imagine myself getting there. The top of the career ladder was not something that I actually saw for myself. And I was starting to feel a lot more of a pull and an interest towards more of the strategic kind of growth and marketing side of the business, thinking about how do we take Headspace international? How do we think about entering new markets? How do we stay competitive? And those were not kind of questions that landed in the purview of the design team necessarily. And that's when I started thinking more about business school. Honestly, business school had been in the back of my mind since graduating from undergrad. It was always an option of maybe in a couple years this is something I would do. And I think it's a little bit of process of elimination as well. I was like, well, I don't want to go back and be like a mechanical engineer. I don't want to go back and get a technical degree. I could go find another job that's in a similar space or adjacent to what I'm doing, or I could kind of dive back into learning and exploring something that was really new for me. I'd say I took like no business related classes, not a single econ class, nothing finance related in my undergrad. And so there was something very exciting about kind of activating a different part of my brain and way of thinking. And that's kind of what the draw for going back and doing an MBA was. Also, I always love optionality, love keeping my options open, and business school is like the people joke it's the perfect way to do that. It's like the best generalist degree you could get. But I think for me it was just really exciting to feel like I was being pushed and learning something new and was going down a track that could open up new doors for me that kind of didn't feel like they existed at the time. So it was really one of these where I wasn't thinking about a 5-10 year plan of do I need an MBA in order to achieve this end goal that I'm going for. I was actually much more thinking about in the immediate future, what can I do now that I think will, one, help me grow as a person, and then two, set me up for kind of that next leap into my career and going in not knowing what that was going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's cool that like, again, gut feeling kind of comes into play. Like I wrote that down, listen to your gut again, but it was like it analytically made sense for you to make that leap and go to business school from this completely different route than what you had previously gone. And I remember in our last conversation, Nina, you had mentioned that you were initially anti-entrepreneurship when you landed at Yale. So I guess what changed now? Because now you're founder of a company. So
yeah, for sure. I think I was a little skeptical of the one pathway of entrepreneurship I'd seen at Stanford, and that whether or not it was the right one for me. That was kind of the super high growth technology company, venture backed, kind of a very exciting space that I'd been a part of at Stanford that I was like really bought into when I was there. And I think it had a lot of misalignment with the way I like to build and the type of companies I like to be in, and just what I saw for my life personally. And what was cool about, so I kind of went into Yale being a little bit like, yeah, I'm not using these 2 years to found anything, which is what a lot of people do with business school. They will go into business school, spend 2 years kind of building something, getting some traction, and kind of setting up for their next venture. I went in being like, that's not interested in doing that, not going to do that at all. Like maybe I'll explore investing or nonprofit, or go into like some big corporation and do and kind of work on a business unit within there. And then I think, it was years later after, I didn't start something straight after Yale. It took another 3 years before I started Generation Sport. But I think when I was there, I started to see different models of entrepreneurship come up, and that it doesn't have to be, being an entrepreneur doesn't mean you need to be raising huge venture rounds or building a next $1 billion company. There's so many different types of business models out there. There's so many different lifestyles you can have as an entrepreneur. And that really opened up my eyes to more pathways within this one thing that I had defined and scoped so narrowly, and kind of thought, I don't think that's for me. So I'm just going to go a different direction.
Totally. And I'm curious for candidates, or not candidates, I'm sorry, like just people out there, I say candidates because I use it all the time at work. People out there who are interested in an entrepreneurship pathway in the future, like you said, there's so many different models. Where would you encourage them to start if they have that curiosity in getting into the space?
Yeah, I always like to kind of build off of other stories. I find that human stories are the easiest ones to connect to. And so for me, why my view was so narrow was I was listening to the like how I built this podcast. I was following TechCrunch only, and all of my entrepreneurship and startup news was coming from like Silicon Valley startup space. And when I started to broaden out and listen to other news sources, collect stories, and actually put them in context of how those people got started, I think probably like early ones that stood out to me, it's obviously like the Spanx story. I think is a great example of not really starting in a business that felt super capital investable at the time, and someone who was bootstrapping it from the beginning and who wasn't approaching it from a very like rigorous business lens to begin with. I think Sarah Blakely is very honest about that. I think hearing more and more stories collected from folks like that, listening to people who are actually like buying and building franchises, or who are more in the private equity space and rolling up different businesses and finding entrepreneurship through maybe not creating something from scratch, but through acquiring it through another type of through a pre-existing business. So for me, it was kind of collecting all these different stories of like, oh, someone did it a different way and they've had a great outcome. And I could totally see myself, in 5-10 years, trying to hit that same goal. I think that was such a good place to start, because I think it's hard to contextualize when you hear entrepreneurship through acquisition or small, medium business. What does that mean? Like, there is actually no technical definition of what a small, medium business is in terms of its revenue, in terms of its number of people, and the term gets thrown around a lot. So for me, being able to anchor it to a real concrete example and hear how hard it, like, what was it like building like this? There's always trade-offs. Building a venture-backed company is high pressure, high growth, fast moving. Building a bootstrap company, much slower growth. It can be really painful. You can be on the verge of shutting down consistently. And so each one has its own challenges, and it's like, which ones are you willing to face and which ones fit best with your type of kind of grit and resilience?
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, especially widening your approach, or widening your vision, I guess, on the voices that you're listening to, the information that you're taking in. Because like you said, there's so many ways to do it, and some aren't even defined ways to do it. So I love that advice. You mentioned that it took 3 years, you said, before you started Generation Sport.
Mm-hmm.
So I absolutely love talking to entrepreneurs like you, Nina, because I think entrepreneurship also has this like young, maybe naive reputation of being like, these are people that were just self-starters and they didn't go any traditional route. They just started their own business and it worked out for them. But like so many entrepreneurs are people like you who have tons of experience before, saw a gap and said, I'm going to go develop that. And it wasn't on your radar when you first started your career. So I just think it's so cool. What were you doing in those 3 years between Yale and starting your company that really helped you in this chapter?
Yeah. First, I was working as a management consultant. I was at BCG for 2.5 of those years. And I think the benefit of that was really starting to feel like I was putting my entire MBA business degree to practical use, actually learning how to do financial modeling, being in these rooms with, I was in the private equity practice a lot. So being in rooms with people who had founded companies, who were trying to exit them or grow them through new funding, and had maybe been building something for 10, 15, 20 years. And then also being on the flip side of being a non-builder, being somebody who was consulting, and kind of my output was strategy and insights and slide decks sometimes, but that I wasn't actually involved in kind of taking that final solution and making it into something real. And I think that helped to show me the parts of my career that I felt like were missing. And that as I'd widened this view of entrepreneurship, it kind of was reminding me that, oh, I think I'm more of an operator than I am a consultant. I think I like being in these places where you're actually building something and where you can see the more direct impact of the work that you're doing on individual consumers or individual businesses that you're working on. So those 2.5 years were great for, one, making me just feel more prepared to be able to run a business myself. And like I kind of understood the mechanics, that I had the analytical rigor to manage my finances well, and that I could make smart decisions about how to build a business. And then also kind of poking me a little bit, saying, hey, like, you need to get back to building. This isn't the stuff that's fun and exciting for you. So I think those were kind of like the two cues that came together to really help push me to want to start Generation Sport. I love the point you bring up about how it can sometimes feel like founders are just this different breed of human. And I think there certainly are founders who are an entirely different species, who just, their risk tolerance is on an entirely different level. They're so resourceful, self-starting. But I don't think that's all entrepreneurs. And in my case, I think people assume I'm much more self-starting, independent than I actually am. If I look back at my career, I actually have been in really structured environments for most of my life. Being an athlete, there are a lot of great entrepreneurial characteristics you develop, like your grit and your resilience, your ability to bounce back from things. But it's also a highly structured environment where you have a training regimen that you follow. You have a coach who's bringing you through it. You have very concrete goals that you hit, and those are completely different than I found from what the reality of owning a business is there's no roadmap. There's no real playbook on how to do it. Every business is completely different. Every founder is different. And so I think keeping that in mind has been helpful as well, that you don't necessarily have to be that natural entrepreneurial type that I think gets really publicized in the media and lauded to certain respects. I think there's a lot of different types of entrepreneurs that build much more quietly, and finding kind of the stories of those people and seeing if you can draw inspiration from that has been helpful for me personally, to see that, oh, there's different ways that you can build it. And it's a skill that can be learned and trained with time. But sometimes I wish I was more decisive or self-starting go-getter, and it's something that I've had to teach myself a lot in this process.
Yeah, had to teach yourself. And have you also had to bring people onto your team maybe that fill some of those gaps, or have you surrounded yourself with people like that?
Yeah, it's probably one of my biggest weaknesses, is a tendency to like to build alone. So it's something I'm working on
Yeah.
actively. My partner definitely brings it up a lot of times. But I think it has been a big piece of just being more comfortable sharing with the people who are close to me as well, who I can feel safe around, and who understand me personally and where my strengths and weaknesses are and where I need help. So building a good team, I think, is one of the areas that is really my focus moving forward. Is how do I get the right advisors? How do I get the right people in my corner to help me turn this into what I believe it can be? And then also, how do I hire for skills I lack? I'm a chronic generalist where I love doing a little bit of everything, but that's not a sustainable pathway to growth. So how do you learn to extract yourself from some of those things and be okay at letting someone else take the reins, or have ownership, and trusting that you have good judgment in character and people, and can kind of build that team around you.
You have good self-perception, I think. Like if you're able if you're able to say all that about yourself and be like, yeah, I'm a generalist, I have to remove myself sometimes, or I have to find people that, will help me build because I'm an individualist. Like, I think that's about really powerful skill that you have.
It's certainly learned through experience and mistakes.
Yeah.
If I had known this a year ago, I would be in a much different place than where I am now.
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes it's all about like, yeah, you got to fail forward, I guess, figure it out anyway. So you mentioned you want to be a builder again. So what actually inspired, like, why women's activewear? What gaps did you see in this space? What was your inspiration?
Yeah. Certainly was not something I'd been thinking about for a while. Never thought I would build in fashion or apparel. Always thought I would kind of be more of a tech person. But I think the spark really came from, again, I gave myself the opportunity to get very bored. So I took a little break after BCG. I left and I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't looking for other jobs. I was kind of just thinking and spending a lot of time trying to understand what did I want to do in my next career step. And as part of that thinking, there was a lot of reflection going on around what were my values, what were the things that shaped me. And as I was kind of brainstorming, just like, oh, if I wanted to work an idea, what would it be? Part of it was forcing myself to think about my time as an athlete and what were problems that I saw in that space. And that's when different pieces of kind of the puzzle of my nonlinear journey started to fall in together. And I think that was something that felt really special, which was not intended, but basically had been like, I love consumer products. I know that I want to build something in the consumer space. I know I want it to be creative. I want it to be focused on building something that I think is both functional and beautiful. And then at the time, it was the big ramp for the 2024 Olympics. And I was seeing all of just this media around, you have Nike with the track and field athletes uniforms for women, which got a lot of heat on whether or not it was overly sexualized or actually functional, and it sparked a lot of discussion about what women should be wearing. It got me thinking about my own experience. I was a gymnast as well as an equestrian when I was younger, and gymnastics was a space that I don't think I was ever going to be truly competitive in, but it was also a space that was telling me no a lot of the times, especially as a teenage girl going through puberty. Being in a leotard was something I was never comfortable with. I had coaches who told me I was getting too big to be a competitive gymnast, really, and I needed to keep my weight under control. And a very, very formative memory of having to learn how to put a tampon in at a gymnastics meet for the first time because I wasn't allowed to wear shorts over my leotard. And just noticing things that I hadn't paid a ton of attention to, but were very formative and kind of steering me on the pathway of the equestrian route, which was much more, I would say, equitable, where men and women actually, it's one of the few sports where men and women compete head to head. And there's no differentiation by gender. There's no differentiation by age group, as long as you kind of hit a minimum threshold. And so that juxtaposition was really interesting. And then finally, also uniquely pulling from my time at BCG, I worked for a uniform supplier. And when I was there, I spoke to hundreds of people. I never spoke to a decision maker in an athletics department who wasn't a man over 40. And I was like, this explains a lot to me. So it was really cool to see all of these really disparate puzzle pieces coming together that were helping me ideate on, okay, what is the problem to be solved here? And for me, ultimately, it was seeing that the fundamental problem is girls drop out of sport at a much higher rate than young boys do, due to societal pressures, body pressures, being told that they don't belong. It's a myriad of causes, but one of the big ones for me, I know as a young girl and even as a woman now, was not seeing my body type represented, not seeing my body type celebrated, feeling like every time I went to try on something, it never fit. It didn't make me feel good in my body. And basically feeling like the current offerings on the market made me feel like I wasn't an athlete, even though I deeply identified with being an athlete. And that was kind of the spark that started Generation Sport. And it was a good 3 months of just thinking and thinking and thinking on this idea before I decided to do anything about it. Sorry, it's a very long-winded answer, but I went into excruciating detail on it because there was no one moment that really told me this is the idea. And even with Generation Sport, I've already done 2 or 3 pivots at this point. It's not what it started at that kind of beginning of 2024.
Yeah. Well, your why is so powerful. I think that's what makes, I mean, you're just the story you told. I mean, I can so relate, and so many women can relate to exactly what you said. And so they're going to identify with your product because you're trying to solve something that they had to struggle through. I mean, I was a little bit like lucky, I'll say, in a sense that like I played volleyball in college, but we had to, the only option was spandex. And
Yeah.
luckily I went to two schools in college that both had uniforms that fit my body type well and I was fairly comfortable in. But like my sister, she played at UCLA and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus here, but the uniforms that they used, the spandex was so small. And it was pre now, like the girls you can wear leggings, you can wear spandex.
Yeah.
There's so many options now, but there's still a long way to go. Like I agree with that. It's so like when you said that decision maker was always a man at that level, you're like, that makes so much sense because it's like their bodies are totally different than ours. They're not thinking about the fit, the feel, the mental bind that our uniforms can really put us in. Like if you don't feel good, how are you going to perform? Like it's just there's so many levels.
Yeah. And I think it's seen as trite sometimes of especially like women's athletics has always been associated a lot with fashion and beauty industries. And I think some people take for granted the impact of how you look on how it makes you feel and how your feeling makes you perform. And that it actually, it makes a big difference. If you look and feel confident, you are just going to step out performing more confidently. I think it's really hard to separate these things. And if you're put into situations where you are dressed in a way that makes you feel vulnerable, that's going to come through in the way that you show up, in the way that you play. And so I think not making light of that has been really important. And I think sometimes we tend to be like, oh, it's not about looks, but it does make a difference. And it can have a real impact on your psyche. People say like dress for the job that you want or dress for the day that you want. And there is a reason that is said. I think we can't just completely ignore human psychology and ignore kind of our base tendencies. And so learning to embrace that and being okay with that and figuring out how do we do it in a way that helps people feel empowered and confident and like they're taking ownership of how they're showing up in the world. Because especially today with social media, with just incredible access to broader audiences, we also are under so much more scrutiny and people will have opinions, people will state those opinions. And so being able to have more control over your image and how you choose to present yourself to the world, I think is hugely important. And also changing the narrative around what is expected of you as a woman and athlete.
That's so true. The expectations have changed because especially just our social media world, you're on a bigger stage every time you step out in that uniform or compete or put something online and it's up for scrutiny. And so people want to feel good. I totally agree. And I was looking at your website, at your products, and like I noticed you guys don't do the front seam on leggings and you with the running shorts, like the waist should be, fitted and the thighs should have room, like things that seem like duh, but like so many people like nobody's gotten it right up to this point. Like you were like, nobody's getting it right. I have to do something about this. So where do you see the industry starting to evolve to be more inclusive to women's bodies and their designs? Or I guess, or what do they still get wrong about it that they're not doing a good job of?
Yeah, I think it comes in waves. I think we had like a really good push and wave to have more inclusive sizing amongst brands and more of an expectation. I actually do think we've gone backwards in that direction, unfortunately, in the past few years, where you're seeing brands starting to cut their sizing ranges or not actually doing the work to create different proportions for those sizes. I think the biggest issue I'm still seeing right now is that especially as brands get bigger, they're trying to cater to everyone. And I think that's something that's really difficult to do, is to, build a brand at scale that meets everyone's needs, because especially as athletes, there is an enormous amount of body diversity depending on what your sport is, what it requires of you physically, how you choose to show up in your sport. If you're someone who's kind of lighter, leaner, quick on your feet, or if you're trying to be more powerful, I think that manifests very differently in how we construct our bodies as athletes and how we train. And so for me, it's been a lot about really understanding who is the core customer that's being left out of the narrative right now and being left out of sizing, and how do we design around their proportions, knowing that it's actually not going to work for everyone, and actually being really honest and upfront about that is that our bodies are different and there is not a one size fits all. So we're going to try and fix these kind of core problems that we've seen a specific, what we call kind of powerful, curvy athletes struggle with. And we're going to go in and address that because no one else is doing it. And then as we grow, the hope is that we can kind of carve out another space where we're seeing problems and address those directly. And just be really honest that like, we're not trying to build one size fits all because it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Absolutely.
No.
And Nina, I'll cut this out. I just noticed we're way over time. Are you late for something, or?
I think so. I'm pretty sure I'm free. Let me just double check. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm also really wordy, so feel free to.
No, I love it. Well, I've been having such a good conversation with you. I was like, this is awesome. And I just realized what time we're at. So I just want to make sure I'm not making you late for something.
Nope. All good.
Okay. I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions then. And we'll start to like wrap, but a couple more. So, okay. So lots of big things with Generation Sport have happened and are on the horizons. What are you most excited for about the brand and how you're evolving?
Yeah. I think two things I'm most excited for. One is we're redesigning a new collection based off of all the amazing feedback we have with so many more resources. We've got more designers on board helping us out. We've hopefully got a new supplier coming up. And so that is coming up in the fall, which I'm really excited to build towards. I think we're answering a lot of the problems that we wish we could have addressed in our first launch, but we're just kind of too new and too young to do. So it's really exciting to circle back on that. And then the second is seeing our community continue to grow. We spent this past year kind of learning who our community was, like who are we appealing to most? Is it actually like teenage girls more, or is it women in their 20s or 30s who are just trying to maintain an active practice? And we're starting to understand exactly who that customer is and be able to speak to her directly. And so I'm really excited to focus this year on building for that customer, and really kind of double clicking and ensuring that we're meeting all of her needs and fixing problems that we're still continuing to see in the activewear business. I think I get shocked every day where like I saw the news on a certain large brand's see-through leggings the other day, and I was like, how is this still happening? Yeah. And so it just reminds me of, even though it feels like everyone's moving so fast and activewear is changing so quickly, there's still so much room for improvement, and we just need to kind of keep our heads down and keep moving on the mission, and focus on every single person who follows us, who shares one of our pieces, who buys a piece and tries it, who leaves a review, and that relationship with that individual and understanding how we impact their lives, I think has been the most fun part of building this and seeing that continue to grow slowly but steadily.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's so cool. I mean, you really aren't just building a product. You are helping people's lives. Like, you are changing the way they feel. You are like when they work out, how they feel in their bodies while they're challenging themselves. I think that's, I love when people, whether they're former athletes or not, like find fitness, especially later in their life, like keep an active practice. It's so transformational, and so many people don't feel welcome in the space for whatever reason. And one reason shouldn't be because of what you're wearing. It shouldn't be because you can't find the clothes that perform for you. And bless you. And I just think it's very cool what you're doing. So I'll just leave it at that.
No, I appreciate it. And it's good to feel like we're not just putting out a product for the sake of the product, and being able to hear that honest feedback of when someone's like, I've struggled to find running shorts that I can actually go on a run in and that don't chafe and don't roll up, and our shorts actually solve that problem. And then it's also very humbling to hear the stories of things that don't fit and things that aren't working right, and realizing that there were a couple pieces where we missed the mark in our first collection, and being able to actually respond to that directly and say, we've heard your feedback, like we're actually going to make a change. I think that's something that's very empowering as a small brand, having the speed and agility to be able to respond to what people are telling us and actually test things and bring people into that process has been really fun and what feels most impactful because it keeps you close to actually solving a problem versus just sitting at a desk designing a beautiful collection that's not really going to move the needle for people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been so wonderful having you on the show. I definitely want to have you back if you're open to it and talk more
Yes,
about the preparations for it down the road and where you've
talk
gone. So
forever.
yes, I'm so excited. I'm already excited to have you back because I could literally talk with you probably for another hour. But final question for you, as the namesake of the show, changing the game. I just want to know what changing the game means to you in your career or this chapter of your career.
Ooh, that's a great question. So for me, I think it's changing it not just for yourself, but for the next generation. It's why we're called Generation Sport. And it's been something that has really shaped my own life and career. I was the second equestrian for Thailand to compete in the Olympics. My path was paved by the person who came before me. I was the first Asian woman to compete in my sport at the Olympics, and it's been really cool to see that my experience has helped to pave a way for others. So just thinking about, for me, changing the game is about those incremental things that we can do that set other people up for success. And hopefully, in achieving our own successes, we are creating pathways and opportunities and inspiration for other people to discover and chase their own dreams. And I think that's the biggest impact that we can have.
Amazing. Nina, thank you so much. Great advice.
Thanks for having me.
I loved having you on the show, and I know our listeners did too. So I appreciate your time. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll be back with another episode and hopefully having Nina on again in the future. So keep an eye out.